Hey everyone, welcome back. It's January 24th, 2025, and boy do we have a lot to cover today.
It's a busy news day for sure. Let's dive right in, shall we?
Let's. So first up, the U.S. State Department has made a pretty big decision. They've decided to put a freeze on all foreign aid.
Yeah, big news. President Trump ordered this review, and until that's finished, no new aid is going out, and existing assistance is on hold.
So we're talking about a pretty wide range of aid here, right? Everything from development assistance to military aid.
Yeah, pretty much everything. Although there are a couple of exceptions, emergency food aid will continue, and the military funding that's specifically for Israel and Egypt, that'll keep going too.
But this freeze has some former State Department officials pretty concerned.
Yeah, they're worried about those critical projects that are going to be left hanging, things like demining efforts, water and sanitation programs. Those are the initiatives that really make a difference in people's lives.
And this freeze could even impact Ukraine's military support.
Potentially, yeah. Okay, so moving on. There's new face in the U.S. defense world. Pete Hegseth is officially the U.S. Defense Secretary.
Yeah, it was a pretty close vote, though. Vice President J.D. Vance had to cast the tie-breaking vote to get him confirmed.
Those allegations that came up during the hearings, about sexual assault and misconduct, those definitely made this a controversial pick.
Yeah, and 3 Republican senators actually voted against him, including Mitch McConnell.
McConnell's statement was pretty direct. He basically said that Hegseth just doesn't have the experience for a job this important.
Okay, now let's shift gears and talk about the conflict in Ukraine. Things have escalated again. Ukraine is claiming they launched a major drone attack against Russia.
Yeah, they were targeting an oil refinery and a factory that's involved in making missile components.
And Ukraine says they used over 100 drones in this attack.
There's footage circulating online that shows fires at the targeted facilities, but Russia says they managed to shoot down most of the drones.
Well, in other news, Moscow has slapped another BBC journalist with a foreign agent label. This time, it's Olga Ivshina, who works for the BBC's Russian service.
This basically forces journalists to label all their work as coming from a foreign agent. Plus, they have to disclose all their financial info.
It's a pretty clear attempt to silence independent reporting in Russia.
Absolutely. And actually, this makes Ivshina the 4th BBC journalist to get this label since the whole war in Ukraine began.
Okay, well, let's turn our attention to the Middle East now. There's a sliver of hope in the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas. Hamas has agreed to release 4 Israeli soldiers this coming Saturday.
This is part of the ceasefire agreement, and it's actually the second prisoner exchange since the ceasefire came into effect.
So what is Israel doing in return?
They're releasing 180 Palestinian prisoners.
It's a complex situation for sure, but this exchange offers a glimmer of hope that both sides might be able to find a lasting peace.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Okay, switching gears completely, now let's talk about a Pakistani YouTuber who got a rather unusual sentence for illegally owning a lion cub.
Yeah, this was pretty interesting. Instead of jail time, the court ordered him to make 12 videos all about animal welfare.
Yeah, the idea is to use his platform to educate his millions of subscribers about responsible pet ownership.
And what happened to the lion cub?
Oh, he's safe and sound. They moved him to the Lahore Safari Zoo.
Good to hear. Now, over in the UK, there's a Bulgarian woman who's accused of being part of a Russian spy ring. She's denying that she knew the information she was gathering was being used for espionage.
She's accused of targeting a U.S. military base in Germany and secretly filming journalists critical of Russia. It's pretty serious stuff.
So what's her defense?
She says she thought she was working on legitimate journalism projects.
Well, that'll be for the court to decide. In the meantime, President Trump is on the West Coast today, checking out the wildfire damage in California.
This visit comes at a time when there's a lot of concern about how the emergency response has been handled and whether California is going to get the federal aid they need.
And to make matters worse, there are new wildfires that have sparked up in Southern California.
Yeah, that's putting even more strain on resources. But on a more positive note, Trump did meet with California Governor Gavin Newsom to talk about the recovery effort.
Despite their political differences.
Yeah, despite their differences.
Yeah.
And Trump also promised that the federal government would step up and help.
Okay, back to the Middle East now. There are some new questions surrounding an Israeli airstrike that hit an apartment building in Lebanon during the 2023 conflict with Hezbollah.
An investigation has found that most of the people who were killed in that strike, and there were 73 in total, were civilians.
That contradicts the IDF's claim that the building was a Hezbollah command center.
Yeah, and it's raising concerns about the intelligence that was used to justify the attack, whether it was really proportionate.
Out of the 68 victims who were identified, only 6 of them had any ties to Hezbollah's military wing. The rest, including 23 children, appear to have been innocent bystanders.
It's a tragedy. The IDF is defending its actions, though, saying they took precautions and believed the strike would give them a military advantage. But with so many civilian casualties, it's raising some really tough questions about the laws of war and how those laws are applied in these situations.
All right, now let's shift gears back to the U.S. Anti-abortion activists are calling on President Trump to take a stronger stance on abortion.
They want him to go beyond just issuing pardons. They're pushing for a nationwide abortion ban.
But didn't Trump say he'd veto a federal ban?
Yeah, he did say that in the past, and he's also said that he thinks abortion rights should be left up to individual states.
But the activists aren't happy with that stance.
No, they're not. They were praising him for pardoning those activists who were convicted of blocking clinics, but they want him to do more. And we saw a lot of that sentiment on display at the annual March for Life rally. There were calls for Trump to take a more active role in restricting abortion access, even access to medication abortion.
This is an issue that continues to divide the country pretty deeply.
And it's not going away anytime soon.
Okay, now for some troubling news out of Nigeria. The government has officially declared a new jihadist group called Lakurawa a terrorist organization.
They're known for having a very strict interpretation of Islamic law. And they've been accused of a whole range of terrorist activities: cattle rustling, kidnapping, even attacking government officials. Some officials are even saying there might be links between Lakurawa and jihadist groups in Mali and Niger.
And that's concerning, because it suggests that extremism might be spreading in the region. So what does this designation mean for Lakurawa?
Well, it gives the Nigerian government a lot more power to crack down on them. But it also raises concerns about human rights abuses. And there's a chance it could lead to even more violence in the region. It's a complicated situation for sure.
In Yemen, the UN has been forced to make a tough decision. They've had to suspend all movement in areas that are controlled by the Houthis.
This comes after several UN personnel were detained by Houthi forces in Sana'a, the capital.
So is the UN trying to get their people back?
Oh, absolutely. They're in talks with Houthi officials, but this whole situation highlights just how dangerous and unstable things are in Yemen right now.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder of the risks that come with trying to deliver aid in active conflict zones. All right, now for a story that's generating a lot of anger and sadness. Afghan refugees who helped U.S. forces and organizations during the war are feeling betrayed and abandoned.
This comes after President Trump issued an order that basically blocks them from resettling in the U.S.
So this order covers all new applications and flights.
Yeah, even for the families of active U.S. service members. The administration is saying they're worried about immigration levels, but for these refugees, it feels like a broken promise.
Yeah, these are people who risked their lives to help the U.S., and now they're stuck in limbo, not knowing what their future holds.
It raises some serious ethical questions about how we treat the people who've helped us in times of war. Okay, shifting gears to a legal case now. Over in the UK, a U.S. mother who's accused of killing 2 of her children in Colorado and then fleeing to London has lost her fight against extradition.
She didn't want to be sent back to the U.S.
No, she was worried about the prison conditions there. And she was concerned about the possibility of facing life in prison without parole. But a judge ruled that sending her back wouldn't violate her human rights.
So what happens now?
It's up to the Home Secretary to make the final decision.
All right, let's talk social media now. Meta, the company that owns Facebook and Instagram, is denying that they're forcing users to follow accounts connected to the Trump administration.
So some users noticed that they were suddenly following the accounts of President Trump, Vice President Vance, and First Lady Melania Trump. And they weren't too happy about it.
So what does Meta have to say about this?
They're saying it wasn't some deliberate move. They claim it was a technical glitch. Apparently, the White House manages those accounts, and when they updated the accounts with the new administration's info, it triggered an automatic update for followers.
So they're saying it wasn't some kind of political maneuver.
That's what they're claiming.
Yeah, well, Germany is getting ready for elections, and the conservative frontrunner is putting immigration front and center in his campaign.
He's promising to be tough on border security and asylum rules.
Why the focus on immigration now?
Well, it comes after a terrible knife attack in Germany where a toddler and a 41-year-old man were killed. The suspect is an Afghan asylum seeker, and this has really sparked a debate about immigration and security in Germany.
So what's this candidate proposing?
He's vowed to tighten border controls and set up more detention centers for deportation. It's a pretty hardline stance that's resonating with some voters, but drawing criticism from others. They say it's too harsh and that it goes against Germany's values. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out in the election.
For sure. Now for a story from the world of mountain climbing. Nepal has decided to increase the fees for climbing Mount Everest.
Yeah, it's the first time they've raised the price in almost a decade. And it's a pretty big jump, the fees going up to $15,000 during peak season.
So what's the reason for the price hike?
Well, they want to bring in more revenue for the country, but it could also help with overcrowding on the mountain, which has become a bit of a problem.
It's always a challenge to find that balance between economic benefits and environmental concerns.
Definitely. Okay, now for some sad news. Lin Ban, the famous jewelry designer and one of the stars of Netflix's Bling Empire, has passed away.
Oh no, that's terrible. What happened?
She died about a month after having brain surgery. It was a complication from a skiing accident. Her son shared the news on social media, and he wrote a really touching tribute to her.
That's so sad. She was a huge figure in the fashion world. She'll be missed by a lot of people.
For sure. Okay, so this next story sounds like something out of a disaster movie. The world's biggest iceberg is on a collision course with South Georgia Island.
We're talking about that massive chunk of ice known as A23A, right?
That's the one. It broke off from Antarctica way back in 1986, and now it's heading straight for this island, which is a British territory and a real haven for wildlife.
What are the chances it'll actually hit the island?
Well, scientists are concerned. They've seen what's happened when icebergs have grounded in that area before. It's been devastating for penguin and seal populations. There have been mass die-offs. It's a scary situation.
Yeah, it really highlights the power of nature and the unpredictable consequences of climate change. Okay, let's turn our attention to President Trump now. He's issued a pretty strong warning to Russian President Vladimir Putin about the war in Ukraine.
He's demanding that Putin put a stop to the fighting, or else the U.S. will hit Russia with new sanctions.
What kind of sanctions are we talking about?
Trump says he's ready to impose heavy tariffs and a whole bunch of other sanctions if there's no settlement soon.
And what has Russia's response been?
The Kremlin says they're still open to dialogue, but Ukraine says they won't give up any territory.
So we're kind of at a stalemate here.
It seems that way. The tension between Russia and the West is still really high, and it's hard to say what the future holds for the war in Ukraine.
It's a situation that could have global consequences.
No doubt about it.
Okay, now let's talk about the fate of TikTok. It's up for sale, and we're hearing that some big names are interested.
Yeah, the U.S. government has ordered ByteDance, TikTok's Chinese parent company, to sell the app by January 19th. They've got national security concerns, and now people like Mr. Beast, Elon Musk, and Larry Ellison are all showing interest.
Each of them could really change the direction of the platform.
Absolutely. And President Trump has thrown another wrench into the mix.
How so?
He said he wants the U.S. to have a 50% ownership stake in TikTok.
So it's a pretty complex situation. The outcome could have a huge impact on the future of social media and how we think about data privacy and national security.
Couldn't agree more. Okay, now for a story that really makes you think. We're hearing from two women who are connected to the Holocaust in a really personal way. One woman is the granddaughter of a train driver who transported Jews to Auschwitz. The other is the great-granddaughter of a woman who was murdered at the camp. They're sharing their stories and their perspectives on how we confront this dark period in history.
It's a powerful reminder of the importance of understanding the past, of learning from it, and of making sure those stories are never forgotten.
Absolutely. These women are showing us that even when faced with unimaginable horror, there's still space for dialogue and understanding. It's a message that's more important now than ever.
Okay, shifting gears now. Even though the war in Gaza is officially over, the scars run deep, especially for the rescue workers who are on the front lines.
Yeah. They had to deal with some incredibly difficult situations, pulling people from the rubble, witnessing all that devastation. Now they're facing the psychological impact of what they went through.
A lot of them are struggling with PTSD.
And unfortunately, they don't have adequate access to mental health support. It's a reminder that the impact of war goes far beyond the immediate casualties. We really need to do a better job of supporting these people who are on the front lines of conflict and disaster.
Their trauma is real, and they deserve our help. All right, so let's end on a positive note. There's a family in Kaduna, Nigeria, that has been taking care of a large cemetery for decades, providing burial services without any official pay.
It's incredible. They've been doing it out of a sense of duty, driven by their faith. Their dedication is truly inspiring, and it's something that's been passed down through generations. And finally, their hard work and commitment have been recognized.
Oh, that's great to hear.
The local authorities have officially put them on the payroll.
That's wonderful news. It's a beautiful story that reminds us that even small acts of kindness can make a huge difference. And it highlights the importance of recognizing and valuing the people who contribute to our communities, even when they're working behind the scenes and not looking for any reward.
Absolutely. It's a great note to end on. Yeah, it's a story that really warms the heart. It shows how much people care about their community.
Absolutely. Okay, we've got one more story to cover before we wrap things up. It's about the upcoming election in Belarus, which is stirring up some controversy.
Yeah, the opposition, led by Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, is calling this election a sham. They're saying that Alexander Lukashenko is rigging the whole thing to stay in power.
And they're urging the international community to just reject the results.
Yeah, they are. It's a bold move, considering Lukashenko's track record. He hasn't exactly been tolerant of dissent in the past.
It sounds like a really tense situation.
It is. Our sources are painting a pretty bleak picture of what's happening over there. Opposition figures are being harassed, arrested, intimidated. It doesn't sound like a free and fair election is even remotely possible.
And Belarus is in a tough spot geographically, right? Sandwiched between Russia and the West.
Exactly. Lukashenko has been trying to play both sides for years, but with the war in Ukraine still raging, the stakes are way higher now.
So what could happen if Lukashenko manages to stay in power?
It'll likely mean closer ties with Russia and more isolation from the West. But if the opposition somehow pulls off an upset, well, that could really shake things up.
Definitely a situation to keep an eye on. Wow, we've covered a lot of ground today. We've gone from those heartbreaking stories in Gaza to the inspiring story of those grave diggers in Nigeria. It feels like we've explored the full spectrum of human experience.
It's true, there's so much going on in the world. But even in the midst of all the conflict and chaos, there are still incredible acts of kindness and resilience happening every single day.
Yeah, it's important to remember that. But it can be overwhelming, right? We're constantly bombarded with information.
It really can be. And it makes you think, in a world where information is often twisted and the truth can be so elusive, how do we even begin to make sense of it all? How do we form our own informed opinions?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is. It's not an easy question to answer, but it's so important. We all need to be critical thinkers. We have to question what we see and hear, and we have to seek out different perspectives because at the end of the day, being informed citizens is one of the most important things we can do for ourselves and for our communities.
Well said. And on that note, let's wrap things up for today. Thanks for joining us for this whirlwind tour of current events.
We'll be back tomorrow with more stories and insights.
Until then, stay curious and stay informed.
Yeah, it's about thinking for yourself, not just accepting everything you see at face value.
It's definitely a skill we all need to work on. Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up today's show. Thanks for joining us for this roundup of news from around the world.
It's been a pleasure as always.
We'll be back tomorrow with more stories and insights. Until then, stay curious and stay informed.